All right.
Okay, this is the February 12th, 2021 regular meeting of the ROS CI Tooling Working Group. Hi, everyone. So I'll share my screen. The funny thing about Chime recordings is it does not record people's faces like a Google Meetings recording would. It only records any shared screen. So the closest I'm going to get is by sharing my browser window here, and we'll see the little tiny thumbnails. Except I'm going to switch over to the document for today, the meeting notes. And I'll ask anyone who's here maybe just to toss your name on the attendance. It's not that important. I just like to have a sort of running record of who's there. We've got a few people on the call. I can probably just type this down real quick. Or not. Anyone else I've missed? We've got Tyler.
Hey.
Hello. Tyler, have we met before? I don't know if I've seen you in one of these meetings.
I don't know if we have. I'm from Picnic. I primarily work on Move It. I joined just to learn more about ROS 2 control and maybe help. I don't know.
Nice. Cool. I'm glad you're here. So, for ROS 2 control, this is not
no, wrong. I'm sorry.
No, I was just like, unfortunately, this would not help you very much with that.
Yeah, I joined to help with unifying CI approaches. I just spent the last hour reading ROS 2 control source. Sorry.
Nice. Yeah, I've been dropping into those meetings.
We have good news for you, though. There's also a ROS 2 control working group.
Yes, exactly.
I've been
dropping into that one.
I attend those meetings on Wednesdays sometimes.
There you go.
Yep. I'm just there as a spy to see what's going on. I'm not actually working on ROS 2 control.
Me too. Well, other than trying to get them to use a component node. Because it bothers me they don't.
Well, I'm sure they're accepting PRs.
They are. I'm working on fixing that.
All right. Cool. So I don't think we have any community updates to look at, so we'll just get that out of the way real quick. Yes, nothing new there. So I had a few discussions I put down here to think about. One of them is the Foxy backport. I figure we'll do the backlog last once we've exhausted other topics. So for now, does anyone have something on their mind that's top priority? I just had sort of a food for thought here, and then I wanted to discuss the Foxy backport. The food for thought was I was thinking about how we're doing recording in ROSBag 2 and how we're missing out on a lot of details of sort of faithfully recreating the system because we have to go through the ROS 2 APIs specifically. And I'm wondering if it might make sense to put like a transport implementation underneath that is just a drop-in DDS recorder that could also then be dropped in as a ROS-based version or any alternative implementation for different transport systems as plugins to the transport layer so that we could get sort of the more faithful data from, for example, DDS. I know that Fast DDS has a recorder code base, but I haven't looked into it in too much detail yet. Yeah, Jacob, what we're doing now is not effectively a DDS recorder. It queries the ROS 2 APIs and creates subscriptions, but that doesn't necessarily record DDS network traffic accurately. And right now we have the problem that we're not able to recreate the QoS landscape accurately on playback because we create a single subscription for what is essentially multiple publishers that could have different quality of service settings. And on playback right now, we create a single publisher for what could have originally been multiple publishers with different quality of service settings. So though it's meant to be an anonymous pub sub system, we're not able to recreate the initial conditions on playback. So I was wondering if we would have a better.
How would a DDS recorder help you?
It would be able to provide you with the participant information for the various topic streams. So like you could say each message came from a specific participant. You could create multiple publishers on the playback. We could still do that. I'm realizing that there is a ROS 2 API that lets you figure out what participant each message came from. It's not the standard setup for a subscription, but it would let us do that, which means that we actually can, I believe, do the multiple publishers with different QoS profiles on playback if we store that extra metadata with the messages. So we don't necessarily need a dedicated DDS recorder to do that, but I was wondering if that might make our job easier rather than continually having to expose new functionality to ROS 2 to meet sort of specific parts of the implementations. I'm not sure though. Maybe it's okay. Maybe we don't need it. That's why I wanted to bring it up in case you had thoughts.
Yeah. The other thing I'm having in mind here is like especially like the use case we have at Bauschalte where we have our custom middleware and we not necessarily use DDS. Mm-hmm. I wonder how would that help us.
You might be able to. So with your custom middleware, I don't know if that's IceOryx or if it's something else.
We started off with IceOryx for sure.
Yeah, so I guess you might be able to implement, a more efficient. We could keep the ROS 2 layer, but then you could maybe implement a more efficient recording layer for that and say like, just get me the messages with zero copy. And write that into a database, so it's one copy at the end of the day, and maybe the ROS API isn't letting you do that. Although it does do loaned messages, which I'm not sure if we're doing in ROSbag 2, which we could implement.
Yeah.
So
we should definitely implement this, but
yeah, is do we want to keep doing it through the ROS 2 API and just use that to be as faithful as possible to the recreation, or would it be more efficient to have transport specific implementations that you could plug in optionally? It seems like what you get from something like IceOryx is you get zero copy and you can use the ROS zero copy API. So maybe that's an argument against a transport specific. And then the other thing is I was thinking about QoS, mixed QoS cases for multiple publishers on the same topic with different QoS profiles. And I think that we can map that through the ROS 2 API without writing a DDS specific recorder. So maybe it's not necessary. We just need to tackle these individual improvements one at a time. I was just wondering if we could save ourselves time, but maybe not. Okay, something to think about. We can move on to the next topic, unless anyone else has thoughts on that. Okay, the next thing was for the Foxy backport. I joined the middleware working group on Wednesday morning, and William brought up that we could, if we wanted to, put all of the galactic ROSbag 2 code out as a Foxy package with a different name, like ROSbag 2 Future or something. And this would make sure we didn't break any APIs or ABIs. We wouldn't be breaking any promises, but we would also be able to release all of the newest ROSbag 2 performance and features to users. I don't know if that's the best option, but it's one I hadn't thought of yet, so it's something to consider in part of this discussion.
Yeah, I'm generally, so I know that, but I'm generally pretty opposed to all of that. mainly because that would mean everybody has to touch their launch files at least twice, right? So you have to touch it once in Foxy, because now all of a sudden you don't invoke these recordings with ROS2 back anymore, but you record it, like you invoke it with ROS2 future back or whatnot. And then you have to have another change of all of that once you go back to Galactic or rolling or whatnot.
Well, there's an alternative, which is that we could release the command line ROS2 bag and have that point to the ROS-bag2 future packages so that anybody who's linked against the C++ packages won't have their ABI broken, but the command line tool could point to the new packet, the new tools, and not have any API breaking changes on the CLI itself. That could be something.
How do you do? Well, but I'm not sure if that's right, because on Debian packages, how would you do that? I'm not sure if Bloom has something. I think Bloom has a, on Debian level you can mark it as conflict. So you could technically mark that the ROS-bag future would conflict with the ROS-bag, so you can't install both simultaneously.
I was thinking you could have both installed simultaneously, and the ROS2 bag command line verb would just link against the future version instead of against the old version. So the command line would no longer be connected to the old version. It would just still be there for anyone who was.
Well, but that means that every time I do apt-get upgrade, my system changes.
Is that true?
Well, then that means the command line package, if we release this, has a new dependency, right?
Yes, that's true. The command line package would have a new dependency, and anybody who had ROS-bag2 would then have double the packages installed, which maybe that's a problem. Okay. So maybe it's not ideal. It was just something to think about. I think that we said we're going to go ahead with the discourse post after this meeting for that, right?
Correct. Yeah, I'm gonna post it. And yeah, we can certainly bring those up as one option to link against or republish it as a ROS-bag2 future or something. We'll see. That's why we posted in the first place, right? To get inspiration from the community to see how much of a, let's say, breaking impact we have.
Yeah.
So the other question to all of this is how long do we let that discourse post sit before we take action?
I'm not sure. That's probably something we should make a hard decision on, and now is probably a good time to do it.
We regularly run into issues with MoveIt where we change the API in a breaking way, and it's something that we're internally frustrated by regularly. And so for many of our customers, we have a private build farm that builds Debians that bumps the version that they can use, but publicly, really the only way to use MoveIt and get the latest features if you're not on the tip of ROS is to, and it has been recently an updated version of ROS, is to build from source, which is not nice, but we don't know another way around it.
Well, I mean, you could break the API publicly, right? It just, people would not be happy with you.
Yeah, that seems pretty anti-user.
Yeah. But our thinking here is that I think that there are approximately 0 people actually building against the ROS-bag2 C++ APIs, and that approximately 100% of the users are calling it from the command line. Which means that if we make a change that is non-breaking to the command line options, then we will not break anyone. But that's something we need to find out. That's what I'm hoping to find out by this post is anybody actually building against ROS-bag2 CPP headers?
Yeah.
I mean, I use them, but I build from source.
Okay, yeah. So in which case you'd be fine.
Because I wanted the new features.
Yeah, exactly. And so it wouldn't necessarily be a problem if we updated the source because you would get those new features now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's I guess what we have to ask. So how long do we want to let the discourse post sit before we make a final decision? And how do we want to make that decision? Just a unanimous vote of, I don't know, approvers on the working group plus open robotics representative, or?
Can you hear me, by the way?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Switching operating systems and plugging in a new microphone solved the thing. Apologies.
No problem. I see your name 4 times on the attendee list, so it must be.
Good, it's working right now.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, anybody have any time periods to throw out here? Should we let it sit for a month, 2 weeks, 1 week?
Is there a way to like advertise it more, like if we went to all the working group meetings over like one cycle and then wait for like the duration of the next cycles of 2 weeks or whatever from announcing it at each of the working groups or something, just to get the word out?
Yeah, this makes sense to me. That like I posted basically like what, in an hour or so. Then we have 2 weeks until we meet again, and then we can discuss the status in 2 weeks and then see what's there to do. Sounds
Okay.
good to me.
Yeah. I've been on sort of the rounds, the working group rounds, except any of them that are before 8 o'clock Pacific are difficult for me. Let's see, what day is it today? It's the 12th. So all of the ones, yeah, like safety critical, real time, I personally have a hard time with. All the rest of them are fine, like middleware and manipulation, although I'm guessing that Tyler from Picnic, you're probably in the manipulation working group, maybe?
Yes, I am. I can bring it up there.
That'd be great.
I regularly am, if not running it, a pretty vocal participant.
Great, yeah. Okay, so yeah, I think that makes sense to me. If we post about it right after this meeting, we have one working group cycle to bring it up, and then we discuss it at the next meeting to figure out where we go from there. That sounds good to me. Anyone opposed to that plan? Cool.
Just to be clear, the question is, who would be upset if the C++ API changed in Foxy?
Yeah, exactly. For ROS CI 2 specifically, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, or if anyone would be broken by that. Because we can try to do something less breaking while keeping the new features, but it would be tough because the code's just diverged a lot from the Foxy version we've done restructuring.
And so what exactly do they get for putting up with that broken API?
Something like a 6x performance increase, and
Okay.
yeah, that's most of
Worth
it.
throwing
There's
out.
a couple usability things, but really it's just like it's gonna work on your realistic loads, which it doesn't right now.
Are there migration notes?
Not yet, but there should be.
Okay.
Well, not only is going to be migration nodes. That's definitely one thing. We're also going to flag it on the next public sync, right? And like make sure that on the release notes, it's essentially highlighting, hey, there's a breaking API change within the ROS CI packages.
Yeah. So we can do a diff on the headers basically, but also it's like if you built against it, you have to rebuild if you get the new version because the ABI is most likely broken, and so there's no guarantee that your linkage will continue working. I've been trying to get that ABI report from the tool on the PRs, but it is not working for me, and I haven't had time to dig in any further. I tried it locally and was able to fix the ZSTD header thing, but ran into a different header. For those of you who are on the email chain, you saw that problem. I did fix the header thing on the latest, and I could backport that change to Foxy right now as a quick fix, and then maybe we'd be closer to being able to make an API diff, because that's breaking the tool. But I don't know, it's a bit tricky. I'm wondering what we can do there. What's that?
Why not? I mean, if it helps.
Yeah, it would help, but from my experience right now, it's not solving the problem entirely, which means after the whole course of like getting a new sync and building PRs against it, we might just be running into a different problem. And so it maybe helps, a little bit, but if it doesn't help all the way, I don't know if it's worth it.
Fair enough.
Because I enabled the test API flag on ROS distro for ROS bag 2, but none of the PR builds actually succeed at that check due to these broken ZSTD vendor headers that got installed for no good reason. I don't even think it's fixed in the latest version of ZSTD. I just had to apply a patch through the CMake. So, okay. If anyone from Open Robotics or anybody has any insight into the ABI checker tool, then I'm all ears. But otherwise, I will try to get to working on it a bit more in the next working group cycle. Otherwise, we have our decision to put up the discourse post, talk to all the working groups, and discuss again at the next meeting, which will be on February 26th. Okay.
Cool. I do have one topic I would like to discuss quickly.
Yeah.
It's centered around the GitHub Actions. So essentially, I would love to see whether the ROS2, what is it, the ROS tooling GitHub Actions, if they allow for custom app repos. So for example, let's say I have a build I want to use, but I want to use it with custom ROS app keys. Can I do something like this? Can I add different app repos?
I mean, yes. Or at least my approach would be to put it in the Docker file. The problem with that is your Docker file is now going to point to an apt repo that may not be public.
Correct. That's the second thing.
And how do you do that? Like there is an API for secrets. Maybe you can do that through the project secrets. I've never tried.
Yeah, I mean, we're able to point at private repositories right now for building that way by using your repo token secret. And there's actually a discussion going on right now for the .repos file as well. But you're talking about like apt dependencies, right? Like the package manager.
Yeah, I mean, using private repos, that could maybe help us as well.
Yeah, so there's this conversation that I just commented on last night, which is that they are using the VCS repo file argument, but it points to private repositories, and they couldn't get there that way. And I comment, okay, it seems like this worked great for folks. I hadn't looked at it since I went to bed. But so this is for private repositories. You can configure the git config to redirect the github.com URL to the token-based one. Maybe you could do something like that with your apt repositories, but it depends what step they're getting installed at.
Interesting.
One workaround I've done is to put it in the entry point script in Docker.
Oh, yeah, okay. So you're using a custom container to run the action, and then in the entry point script for the action, you're adding some apt keys and repos and then doing an apt-get update or something. And then when it does the action ROS CI, it does a ROS step install, and it's finding the packages from your custom repository instead of from the public one. Is that the idea?
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing this. I haven't actually used the ROS Tooling's CI system, but in GitHub Actions, I'm doing this with industrial CI.
Gotcha. Yeah, so that's something I think we want to move the conversation to next is how do we maybe consolidate industrial CI and this CI system and move its system and nav2's system and stop duplicating all of the work because, you know, I don't like doing this work that much, but I've been maintaining it because it's a useful tool. So if I could do less of it.
Before we shift that,
sorry.
Is there a way that I can specify my own Docker file here? Because maybe that would actually sort out so many things.
Let's see.
Yeah. I'll look for my config.
So let's see. I know you can create an action that uses a Docker file. Other than that, most of the time what we do is to specify what container to run in. Let's see, this is for.
But so there's no neat API on the ROS to set up on the ROS tooling GitHub Actions, right? From what I see.
No, not right now. We could definitely think about that. You know, I'm always open to suggestions for usability here. I think it's improving all the time, which is kind of why I haven't wanted us to go to 1.0 yet, because I don't think we've reached that final useful tool.
I just looked through the documentation. It's not part of the GitHub Actions API. It's part of the industrial CI API as to what Docker image I'm using.
Oh, gotcha.
Which is less useful for you.
Yeah, I mean the image part is fine. You can run run the workflow in a image of your choice, which is how I do most of these tools. We don't actually run the setup ROS action most of the time. Instead, we use the pre-built containers for it. So setup ROS Docker Ubuntu local latest. So that's sort of but that doesn't let you specify a Docker file here. That just, you know, if it exists on Docker Hub already.
Okay, so that's how I'm doing it, but I am creating it on Docker Hub.
Yeah. Okay. These are on Docker Hub as well.
I use a periodic GitHub action to trigger a Docker Hub build.
Oh yeah, that's what we have in.
And the reason I do that is because Docker Hub got grumpy at me because people were landing a lot of PRs quickly.
Oh.
And my Docker Hub build takes a long time. So I build it every other day right now.
But that means all of that stuff is open, right? What if you have a private Docker file?
Yeah, if you have a private repository, it's a different story. You could have a private Docker Hub account and set up your token for it, probably, but I'm not entirely sure.
I've never done that. I don't know. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, there's probably a way, but I think it should be easy because like the question here is just how do we add a repository and like an apt repository. It doesn't necessarily mean how do we add an entirely custom runtime environment. So maybe the answer is more like you just write a quick script that has the tokens as GitHub secrets so they're not exposed, or even the URLs as GitHub secrets so they're not exposed, and you just say like apt key add this and apt repository add that.
To be clear, so I understand, you have code that is public on GitHub that you're using actions with that depend on some private code that's hosted elsewhere.
Essentially ROS steps, ROS step keys, right?
Yeah, it sounds like it's but it's private code or it's privately built forks of existing code is a possibility. I don't know for sure. I don't know if you can talk about it. Yeah.
Okay.
But yes, it's public code that depends on private dependencies is what it sounds like. Or it's a private repository that wants to use this tool to build against other private stuff.
In that case, if it's a private repo, GitHub itself has API for storing images, and you could put your Docker image in GitHub storage.
You could in the GitHub package registries.
Yeah, we could do all sorts of stuff. I mean, technically, if it's so hidden, we could also just run our own build farm if you want. The thing was really just like, I mean, I like the GitHub Actions and I like the ROS tooling infrastructure, and I see that you know, having that option of just specifying your own Docker file could be a valuable asset to it. Just like, you know, I use the general open source public tools, but I have my own custom, maybe proprietary environment set up. So kind of like that idea.
Yeah, you could also, I don't know, like do something like just run, you know, some private setup script that like right in here. And you could have that in the repository if it's private, or you can have it be filled in by, you know, arguments of like secrets.token, so that you don't expose it. If you wanted to do something like that, I'm sure that this would, it depends without knowing exactly what you're trying to do, but at the end of the day, I feel like something like this probably gets the job done, instead of having to be part of the API.
Interesting. So it would just, and that runs within the Docker file, right? Obviously.
Yeah, exactly. So this is all the same environment. So that anything that happens in here is a persistent environment within a running container, and that's why you can do stuff like run setup ROS and then run action ROS CI, and it has all of the dependencies installed now.
And then you can use the built-in cache thing or all the other stuff like that.
Exactly. So then, you know, if this were to set up an override apt repository within this custom script, then when this got around to calling ROS-dep install, it would hit those repositories instead of the default ones.
That could actually be a valuable solution already. It's not so much that I can't talk about what I have in mind. It's more like I actually don't really know what I have in mind. I have like some bits and pieces from like various colleagues, and there are definitely private repos and app repositories somewhere involved. So I'm scouting what I can actually do.
Yeah. So I think that just running an arbitrary setup script before calling the CI action should probably get done most of what you need to do. And if it doesn't, then, and you have a specific use case, it's not that hard to upgrade the tool. We do it all the time. So like if you have sort of an API request, we can figure out how to implement it.
Yeah, sounds good. Cool.
Yeah, I think we're actually having a lot of good discussion on Action ROS CI right now. I think Christoph's on the call and has been making really nice contributions that I've just been slow at reviewing. But I tried to get to everything on my GitHub queue last night, which I think I did. So if anyone has any reviews they want from me, just let me know. I'll make sure I get to them. Other than that, okay, the next thing was thinking about consolidating CI systems. I'm not sure what the first step to take on that is, but it's something I want to be talking and thinking about.
Well, I've spent a lot of time over the last few months trying to understand all these different systems. I can tell you that they serve, or at least I can talk to the differences between industrial CI and what NAB2 did, and maybe that can help your understanding. Industrial CI is very much built to be SWRI or ROS Industrial, the people behind it, have client projects a lot like Picnic, where they build out one-off things for customers, and at the same time support some open source stuff. And those one-off things need CI, and they're not huge libraries typically. They're more like small ROS applications. And so industrial CI is built to be the very full-featured cross-hosting thing, because like Picnic, SWRI has the problem of many of these customers have their own repo hosting CI system infrastructure already in place that isn't necessarily GitHub Actions, and they want one tool to basically drop in and do like ROS CI, ROS Project CI. And that's why it's been so useful for us with our customers. It is very flexible. And another cool feature of it is also built to make it really easy for developers to recreate the entire CI run locally. So you can, if you're getting a failure, you don't have to like learn about Bitbucket CI to figure out how to debug it there. You can run the entire thing that's run up there locally, which is a really cool feature of industrial CI. So that's what industrial CI is good at. What industrial CI is bad at is it doesn't do pipelining. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that pipelining your CI run and fancier caching requires you to build a lot of that functionality into the CI description. Industrial CI, because it has to be by its design, CI system agnostic, tries to have the least dependencies on the infrastructure, the CI infrastructure itself. The CI infrastructure is a way to pull a Docker image and kick off a script. That's like the way the CI infrastructure is treated by industrial CI. This is bad for large repos. For example, MoveIt. We've been using Travis for a long time with our own CI system, MoveIt CI, that we wrote a long time ago. And it's very tied to Travis. And recently, the reason we became very interested in this for MoveIt's sake is, I don't know if any of you guys have experienced it, but Travis changed its policy towards open source projects. Their public reason is that they had people using their open source CI to mine cryptocurrencies. But the result of this is they basically killed open source CI on Travis for anything but a token tiny projects. So we're now paying a subscription to Travis CI to continue MoveIt. It's very expensive and it's still very slow. We kick off 5 runners that each take about an hour and a half to complete for every CI job. And right now we're only paying for 2 runners. So it's like 4 hours per CI run. And if like on a day a few people submit things, you might not get your CI run till the next day. So we're looking at alternatives. Industrial CI doesn't really serve us very well because a lot of the features that we built around in Travis, we would just lose, and our CI would get much slower going to industrial CI because it's CI system agnostic. It can't use the caching or the fancier features of the CI system. So that's where the nav2 project comes in. The nav2 project used Circle CI, and right now, from my understanding, my testing, Circle CI has the best free offering. They give the most open source projects, and they also have the best caching system. So for large projects, it might be worth Circle CI. The downside is Circle CI's API to enable a lot of these fancy features is much more complex than most of the other CI providers, which means you have CI configurations that are more complex, which means that when they go wrong, it's, there's less people that can easily figure out what's happening. And I don't want to suggest it as a general solution to ROS projects because it's just it really only makes sense if your project is big. You have a huge CI run that you have to do. So I'm working on adapting Move It to use a similar system, or at least Move It 2, the ROS 2 variant, to use a similar system to the Circle CI system. What's stopping me on that is Move It's CI requirements are actually much more complex than Nav2. And some of that has to do with the fact that Nav2 doesn't include or doesn't run tests that just explode in complexity in ways that Move It's tests are just not as I guess robust in some ways. I'm getting lots of timeouts on Circle CI. That's
gotcha.
FCL is not playing nice, and I haven't figured out the right optimizations for it. And anyway, so that's what's blocking that. Also, I assume some of you know this, but ROS or have experienced this. But I think the ROS 2 workflow is not well defined, and it's very easy to have errors in your CMake that go unnoticed. And I think because of the way Nav2 wrote their CI system, they are masking a bunch of errors in their CMake. And I am on a path to try to fix that and Move It 2. I hope someday there's a linter for it. Maybe I can be part of that solution. But in the meantime, it's not a drop-in use for us because I don't want to hide those errors. I don't want CI to silently allow certain types of CMake errors.
Yeah. Do you have an example off the top of your head?
The export targets. What happens is, this is the simplest. This is a summary of it. When they basically symlink install is broken with Nav2.
Interesting.
And the reason symlink install is broken is because it depends on the CMake export targets, and I think the documentation for how to use CMake export targets in ROS 2's tutorials is unclear. The authors disagree with me, but I'm working.
The authors also wrote the CMake book, and so it's hard to argue with them about CMake.
I mean, I think the CMake book is much clearer about how it works.
Yeah, I just mean that Dirk was involved with that or something.
Oh, okay. Well, Dirk doesn't.
But I guess he's not. Yeah, they're arguing on that stuff.
I submitted a bug to the ROS 2 documentation and got it closed because he said it was because I didn't understand it, not that the documentation was unclear. So.
Is this for the CMake documentation on the tutorials? I'm wondering if I'm looking at the right page. This one.
No, it's the ROS 2/ROS or documentation repo. Anyway.
Oh, gotcha. The one that goes to
the website, the main ROS 2 website.
docs.ros2.org, which we just learned this morning, is going away.
Because it wasn't very good.
Well, it's moving over to docs.ros.org. They're just trying to consolidate.
Getting a new URL is all.
I'm not here to say I'm equally at fault at creating bad documentation or non-existent documentation. When I find that I'm confused, I would like to make the documentation clearer.
Yeah, I'd like to be less confused.
I would like to be less confused, and I would like to, maybe pay it forward and help other people be less confused. But anyway,
So navigation is suppressing some of those CMake issues by building all of the stuff that you need, even if your CMake didn't specify it properly, something like that?
How they're suppressing it is they source the workspace before they run test.
Oh, yeah, that's bad. I had somebody open a request for that on Action ROS CI saying you should source the tests before running them, and I'm like, no. Here's the problem in your CMake file that is causing you to need to do that.
Yeah, so that's why nav2 is broken. Also, not to cast, or not that we are immune from it. Move it CI does it, and move it 2 is broken in the same way.
I mean, I think the solution to that is to remove that source call and then hack at it until the tests work.
Yeah.
I mean, you could do that locally. You don't need the CI system to.
No, I know, but I have to do it in one fail swoop.
Yeah.
Before somebody sneaks in yet another PR that adds yet another break. Yeah. So that's so I could change the CI system so move it 2 is just broken. And then nobody can submit PRs, but nobody would like that. I have used that option before.
Yeah.
But I try to avoid it if I can.
And sometimes it's worth it. Like there is the concept of like the system is too broken. We need a code freeze until it's fixed.
Yeah.
Which is not ideal, but is something to consider. Mostly that's easier on a private project when you pay people salaries and can tell them what to do.
Yeah, it's much easier with a client project for me to say when I'm leading the team for me to say no, we're gonna fix this.
Yeah.
Stop. We're gonna fix this. But out when you have public contributors on a public project, it's pretty anti-community to change the CI system so it stops building.
Something you could try is introduce the tooling actions as a non-required check and try to get them to green because they're not going to source the setup that bash before running tests. It's not a feature I'm going to merge. And then once you get it to green there, then switch over to removing that feature from your CI. I don't know. Yeah,
I mean, my current solution is to add the sort of the same thing. Add my version of the nav2 circle CI thing as a unrequired check, and then work to get it green. But I have other issues. I have to figure out why. They do a debug build for their code coverage reporting, which is much more accurate than a release build. But debug builds of MoveIt are orders of magnitude slower at running tests. Like tests that pass in seconds are taking tens of minutes.
Oof, and that's a big difference.
And some of it has to do with like things that Eigen just is like in a release build just is like this whole chunk of code doesn't need to exist, and FCL does stuff like that too. And then you build and debug, and it like builds in a lot of non-optimized math into your hot section. So
yeah.
And some of this may just be like our tests need to get better too. So speaking of GitHub Actions and the tooling that you develop, how are you taking advantage of pipelining?
So can you explain what you mean by pipelining here? Is this like different library dependencies for dependent builds, or?
No, so I'll explain the system in Circle CI that nav2 is using. An example of this is it starts out with 2 jobs, and those first 2 jobs is it checks out a Docker image for a debug build and a Docker image for the release build. They've already been built somewhat recently, both of them on Docker Hub. then it updates them to be point at, you know, whatever the CI or whatever the state is for the run. So the pull request or whatever. And then it does the debug and release build. And then from those, it can spawn all sorts of things. So like the release one then it takes the result of that, and it runs a the resulting state of that, and it runs a linting one, and then it splits up the tests actually and runs the tests in like parallel and separate containers. And then the debug one will clean tidy actually runs under the debug one, and they do like a limited subset of their tests under debug and code coverage reporting. And then also under the release one, they have a nightly that in parallel runs with a whole bunch of different middlewares enabled.
Okay, gotcha. So GitHub Actions themselves, like the action is sort of meant to be an atomic step of a process, and the workflows that call these actions, those have all of the pipelining enabled. Like you can depend on outputs of various runs. Like I'll bring up here for the cross-compile tool, we're running a nightly check, and via the matrix setup in CI, you can like set up a matrix to run, you know, all these architectures and all these things and all these whatevers, and then when those are done, it will report its status to whatever, and you could pipe different outputs from different jobs into these various steps. The jobs within the workflow, but the action itself, like we're sort of building these atomic actions, like Action ROS CI. What you can't do very well right now on GitHub is share workflows between repositories. So this YAML file that makes all of this happen, which seems kind of like what you're talking about, it happens in parallel when it builds. This is written within each repository, and I'm not sure of a good way to share it other than saying that you have something like
just copy pasta.
Yeah, exactly.
But could you like, in the case where your repo is, your CI runs are just really long and you want to optimize it, is there a GitHub Actions way of taking the result of the build and having one and like sending something off to go do linting while you send something else off to run tests?
Let's see, the results of the build, I couldn't say off the top of my head. I think so, because you can do you can upload artifacts to.
Okay.
There's like an artifact cache for your repository. Yeah.
It's limited to 5 gigabytes. That is the thing I learned about recently.
There might be paid options to increase that, I'm not sure. Or you can like overwrite old stuff as long as your individual runs aren't larger than that.
The problem with that is the cache. This is something else. I was trying to use GitHub Actions for MoveIt itself.
Uh-huh.
The cached result of a debug build of MoveIt is 4.9 gigabytes.
Yikes.
So that's compressed.
Yeah. So that's something that I don't know if the GitHub Actions, at least the free version, will manage that scale.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Is it a 32-bit issue? The 4 gigabyte limit.
No, I think it was they chose that. Another thing I wanted to ask you, I've noticed this on client projects. I'll get to that in a bit, but the 5 gigabytes I think was chosen to limit their resource usage of storage. I think the other thing that brings up another thing. Have you noticed them queuing your jobs for a really long time?
Yeah,
I've noticed
sometimes.
I've noticed this on client projects and it seems like it's like a progressive back off. Like I'll submit a PR and then somebody else like 3 minutes later will submit another PR, and my PR will take off and theirs like will queue in an hour.
Yeah, I've seen this problem on specifically Action ROS CI, which runs these like full end-to-end ROS source builds to make sure that the action works properly. And that one, since we have Dependabot enabled on it, it's always updating the JavaScript packages, and sometimes they come through a lot at a time, and it kicks off all these CI builds, and then all of a sudden it seems like nothing's running, and it's queued up for half a day. Yes, I have also seen that.
I think they have like a ratcheting back off, because when I was trying to compare the different CI providers for like what they say their limits are, GitHub doesn't list any limits other than that 5 gigabytes of cache.
They also say that you have 2 subsequent runners at the same time. You have some limited number of simultaneous runners. I think it's 5. And is it per repository or is it per organization?
I don't know.
Yeah, that's the part that I couldn't quite figure out. The documentation's not as complete as I would like, and there's no way to see your like global queue or like actually how many runners are executing at any given time. It'd be nice if there was some view like, here's the queue. It's like this.
Yes. When I was discussing this with I was talking to the guy at Swery who maintained the industrial CI, and he was like, his opinion was that GitHub Actions was great for small projects, but when you started to try to use it on a large project, you discovered a bunch of foot guns. Like it was designed to like stop you from using it in large projects.
Maybe, maybe it's designed to incentivize use of a paid tier. Although I don't know what those look like.
They don't exist.
Don't they? I thought they did. Or no, it's like if you have a GitHub Enterprise account, there's like you have a different usage limit. That's what it is. But that's like a huge step up.
It's $29 a month per user.
Yeah.
And it gives you a certain number of credits for the org. But they still do the ratcheting back off. We have those accounts for some of our clients.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So the alternative that I've thought about here is I haven't tried doing this, but the self-hosted runners, that might solve the problem. If the GitHub Actions infrastructure is free and you can pay sort of just server costs rather than full, platform as a service accounts, something like a Circle CI account, which is going to cost more than just like EC2 instances, maybe that's the option, is the self-hosted runners.
That sounds great. Except for they advise you strongly to not do that on a public repo.
Interesting.
The reason is because you are essentially allowing remote code execution on your runner by anyone who submits a PR.
To mine Bitcoins.
Or whatever they want to do. To launch denial of service attacks or whatever they want to do.
By just spinning up a whole bunch of PRs.
I don't know
what the protections are.
I don't know how that's different from their hosted runners.
Maybe that's where their back off comes in, is they have those DDoS protections and they consider some of our CI workflows to be denial of service.
Yeah, they consider large projects to be denial of service attacks on CI.
Yeah, exactly, because we slow down their infrastructure. Well, okay. I don't know how we consolidate this. It sounds like all of these systems are meeting slightly different needs, but it does still feel like a big duplication of effort.
Yeah. I mean, I would like to collaborate and try to find ways we can. I would like to play with your CI system. I should just allocate some time.
Yeah, please give it a try and just let us know here where it's falling short in terms of your use cases. This GitHub Actions infrastructure is pretty handy. I've found it really useful. It's not perfect all the time, but it's a big improvement over, say, Travis, in my opinion.
Yeah. The problem with Circle CI is not just the complexity, but when you start actually trying to use it, it's expensive. Other than they give you a ton for open source. They chose this number, I don't think arbitrarily. They chose it to be funny, but they give you 666 hours per month for every public repo. And I talked to their sales team. They'll increase it if you hit it. They don't actually care.
For open source projects, yeah.
For open source projects. But for private stuff, if you like, even if you just don't have, it easily runs $30 a user a month.
Per user. Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
You
look at the pricing and just says $30 a month, but that's for every person who can kick off jobs, essentially.
Basically, you pay for you pay for users and you pay for usage.
Yeah.
But when you like plug in some realistic numbers for a smallish client project, $30 a user is like actually about what you're getting at.
Yeah.
Which is expensive.
It adds up, especially if you have a lot of users. And it doesn't work very well for an open source project where you want to be able to kick off jobs automatically on pull requests from randos who are helping contribute code.
Oh, it works great for open source as long as it's public open source.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Because they give away that for free.
But can you get the upgrade, the performance upgrades for your project for that open tier?
Yeah, you get the whole system basically.
Okay.
The only thing they restrict is Docker layer caching, which seems odd to me. But talking to sales guys there, they gave me a bunch more stats, like internal stats on what Nav2 is doing. Nav2 is using something like 4 terabytes of cache a month, and they're just like, that's fine.
Wow.
Okay. So I don't know.
We're already over time. I just realized we're past 10. No, this is I think this is a good, useful conversation. Like, we're maintaining these tools and we want to make sure that we're thinking about the roadmap properly. But one thing I also wanted to check was, Jacob and Matt, did you have a discussion you wanted to have on this live meeting as well?
I'm all set. I think Jacob and I wanted to talk about what he's doing, or maybe at least set up a breakout session.
No, actually, I think I've gotten all the issues that Mr. Knapp raised, and I think, hopefully.
Mr. Knapp's my father's name. Yeah.
But no, the reindexer seems to be working correctly.
Cool. I'll take another look if it's.
Although it's not, it's having some sort of weird failing check, the build and test pull request.
Oh, not the PR runner for Jenkins, but the action test is failing.
Yeah, it's under some checks were not successful, and the top one is test ROS back2 / build and test.
Yeah, so it doesn't highlight the issues really. So that's another shortcoming right now of the system, is that you have to sort of dig into the logs and just scroll to the bottom to see what actually failed, which would be nice to pull that out.
The logs are extremely unhelpful. It just says the process user bin bash failed with exit code 1. So it's.
Well, it'll show us what we're looking. I mean, let's just look at that real quick. Let's see, reindexer core. I think I'm still sharing my screen.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't been going to too many off-topic websites while we're talking. So for this, I normally just go to view raw logs. It'd be nice to, the Jenkins system has some sort of logic to pull out all this stuff. Okay, record end-to-end timeout. This is one of the flaky tests. It times out like 1 out of 10 times.
Yeah, I've been getting that. I've been getting some like record end-to-end timeouts on mine as well.
Yeah, so this is actually marked as xfail, which means that wait, why did that not find it? Test, record, and 2. Did I spell it wrong? Or is that not what it's called? Oh, maybe I should not type when I don't have to. Yeah, okay, so it just timed out. Yeah, this isn't a problem with yours. It's something that maybe we should actually add the test options to skip xfail, just like the Jenkins build farm does. because we've marked them that way for a reason. Although they pass most of the time, and I really want to stabilize these tests. Like I don't like having xfail tests in here, and we even have some tests that are disabled on Windows, which also bothers me. Another thing I want to get going is because Windows is a tier 1 platform for ROS 2, I really want to get a build for Windows going. We started on that, but we didn't fully succeed at getting it set up. It's really hard to set up development environments in Windows.
It is. Yeah. We have a guy from Microsoft who is actually calls into our working group meetings and has been making Move It 2 work on Windows. And
who is that?
I don't remember.
Okay, that's fine. I know there was
a L, I think his name's.
Okay. There was a guy from Windows who was trying to help out with the Action CI for a while there. I think occasionally someone from over there shows up in ROS 2 world.
He has a GitHub action to build Move It.
In Windows. Okay.
In Windows, but we haven't he hasn't submitted as a PR. He just shows us in meetings because he's actually, so Microsoft has a private version of GitHub internally. Yeah. And he is building and packaging Move It on that in his fork and testing it there. And he wants to contribute it publicly. It's just we have disagreements with him about how to go about certain CMake changes that we haven't resolved yet.
Yeah, that can be hard. It's like, I don't want to change this just because it helps your specific system. It's not actually correct, or it's correct as it is. It doesn't need to be changed.
We would like if Windows just
worked.
I mean, this seems like a Windows problem, not a R code problem.
Yeah. So this
Windows should just behave nicer.
This theoretically, oh yeah, it was no, this guy's from Canonical, but he was doing some Windows builds. And then Sean Yen was the Microsoft team member who was contributing here.
That's not.
Okay, not the same guy. So GitHub workflow for Windows CI. So we do theoretically, or we started supporting Windows and just haven't pushed very hard on it. But so this is running
one of the problems
Windows latest doing setup ROS and action ROS CI. So these actions, the idea is that they support Windows, but that's not something we've maintained very well.
One of the problems that we've run into is just the packaging isn't super mature on Windows, and we have a deep dependency tree. Yep. And so running CI on Windows means we're building a lot of stuff from source.
In my experience, it means you build the entire ROS2 .repos from source.
Yeah, and RCI is bad enough.
Yeah, this is a real pet peeve of mine. It's like, why does Windows not have its apt or yum or whatever? Like, there's chocolatey and nougat, I guess, but neither of those really picked up much steam in terms of getting a real amount of packages on there.
I feel like if ROS wants to support Windows, Windows needs to first have a packaging system that works.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's part of why Mac support. Well, yeah, that was part of why Mac support got dropped. But the most part is just that nobody's actually maintaining the Mac builds.
Well, Mac ports and Homebrew are better than chocolatey.
Sorry, I mean the ROS2 Mac support is not tier 1 anymore.
Do you think Windows is tier 1 only because?
Because they're on the TSC, I think.
That's okay. Not because they've actually become a tier 1.
Well, they support it. They provide. Are they? Yeah, Microsoft is on there. Yeah, Sean Yan. Okay, he's a TSC member. And Windows support, we don't have someone from Apple on the TSC, and I don't think that there ever was an Apple representative doing Mac support for ROS2. I think somebody else was funding it at the beginning, and then whatever that was disappeared, and nobody was putting in the development resources necessary to maintain those builds, and it fell on Open Robotics. And they're like, we don't care about this. We don't want to spend time doing it. So that's what happened. Whereas Microsoft is still like putting in the effort of making sure the Windows builds work.
I feel like the Windows in ROS 2 is a big thorn for us. And the reason is because we constantly get clients who are like, ROS 2 supports Windows and our whole environment is Windows. We're doing it in Windows. And we're like, nominally.
Yeah. Our build doesn't work well there.
We're like, we can do it in Windows. It's just going to be way more expensive. And they're like, but it says it supports Windows. We're like, it built once on Windows.
Yeah. Anyways, I think we've gotten
off
the topic, and we're at the end. Thanks for the good discussion. I think this is helpful in at least pushing forward our thinking, even if we don't have any specific action items.
I only had one other thing on the reindex issue.
Okay, yeah.
You had made a comment in SQLite storage.cpp about some changes being from an out-of-date branch. I changed the lock guard.
You changed that? It just looked unrelated.
Well, I believe I had changed it because it was not building, and I had looked at something. So I've changed it back.
Okay.
But I'm not sure about the right. Well, actually, it may have been.
You haven't changed it all the way back, I don't think.
But I'm not sure about the right_locked function.
It should be there. Like if it's on master, it should be there.
I'm not sure if it is on master because I did the rebase, I thought. I'm pretty sure.
This is in SQLite storage.hpp, right? Locked. Yeah, it's a private function on SQLite storage in the SQLite storage.hpp header. Okay. Maybe your rebase, you didn't resolve it correctly, perhaps?
No, the rebase.
I mean, you have few enough changes here, and they're mostly new files that I would consider, instead of maintaining your 25 commits, I would consider just doing a mixed reset and crafting one new commit.
Once more with the slow folks.
Yeah. So if you, I'm not sharing my whole screen. I'm just sharing the windows. This window. But if you do for example, a git reset mixed to like origin master, this will change the git tree to be on origin master without changing any of your files. And so all of your changes from origin master will be there, and you could then just like, add source reindexer.cpp and craft one new commit that is like add the reindexer, and that way you have one commit instead of 25.
That's actually how I created this branch to begin with. Similar, but it's just this one file that.
But you could also do like an interactive rebase to squash all of the other commits. It depends which way you prefer. Sometimes rebase is just difficult if there's a lot of commits and there's been conflicts. Is all.
Yeah.
Often what I'll do is I'll do an interactive rebase, and I'll do it in 2 steps. I'll interactive rebase and squash my whole stack into one one commit.
Just within the branch that you're on.
And then I'll do the rebase onto
and then you've got
wherever.
One commit.
Then I have one commit to resolve.
Yeah, that's a good way to go about it. Yeah, so two-step rebase, one onto your common ancestor or the base of your branch, and then onto the new branch you're actually trying to rebase to. That makes sense.
And then resolve the conflicts there.
Yeah.
And then if like there's some file that is just like I didn't want to change that file, you can just do like a checkout of that file and then squash it into your current commit. That's another way you can do that from where.
I end up doing the mixed rebase a lot of the time just because it's like I do my sort of personal review of every file individually before adding it into the commit, and I find that workflow works for me. But there's so many ways to use Git. I was just like that. One of those many ways would be the way to figure out where you got this change that isn't matching up with your branch.
It seems to just be a small thing. I think what I'll just do is just copy over from the actual master and just manually stick it in.
I would just do a git checkout command for it instead of a copy paste, like, because you can check out a specific file from a specific branch.
Well, the problem is that I have changed this file intentionally in other areas.
The SQLite 3 storage, the SQLite storage?
Yes, the database prepare statement had offered QoS profiles added to it.
That doesn't seem related to this PR.
I believe I needed to do that in order to get the QoS profiles out of the SQL databases.
I see. And we just weren't fetching them before. We were only using the metadata file?
Right.
Okay. Yeah, so if we just clean up the rest, and then that will probably be more clear why that was a change. I couldn't tell what was real and what was not here. So maybe just, let me know by doing the re-request review when you think it's ready for re-review. I think you could hit this button, right?
I think so. 1 second.
Then it shows up in the notifications.
Yeah, there's a little re-review button thing that I can
Perfect.
hit.
Yeah. So when you're ready, just hit that, and it'll show up in my notifications, and I'll take another look at it.
Okay. Hopefully my code, for the most part, has not been too terrifying.
No, it just needs a little cleanup. That's all. It looks mostly fine. Most of my comments have been stylistic, as you have seen.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Okay, let's get going. An extra 30% over normal working group time.
Apologies.
No problem. It's good to get to everything, and I don't happen to have another meeting right now. So everyone have a good Friday, and thanks for the good talks.
See you
Take care.
Yep, bye.
See you.